Hello, my name is Teresa Matos. I'm a professor and researcher at the Polytechnic Institute of Porto Alegre in Portugal. Today I present AI-powered inclusion technologies, trajectories, and ethical challenges in higher education. This is based on a systematic review about how digital technologies and artificial intelligence can support or sometimes threaten inclusion in higher education, especially for vulnerable students. Higher education is becoming increasingly diverse. Universities now receive more students with disabilities, specific educational needs, learning difficulties, and socioeconomic vulnerability. So this diversity is positive, but it creates new demands. Inclusion can no longer be just a support service. It must be a structural responsibility of institutions. So, the transition to higher education is a critical moment. Students face new academic demands, more autonomy, and the need to build new social networks. For students with disabilities or other vulnerabilities, these changes are often implied by functional, communicational, pedagogical, and organizational barriers. When vulnerabilities accumulate, the risk of failure and dropout increases. The problem that I achieve is that many vulnerable students do not fail because of lack of ability, but because institutions are not fully prepared to respond to their needs. They must deal with heavy workloads, self-regulation demands, and sometimes inconsistent accommodations. At the same time, higher education is under pressure to expand and to adopt digital technologies quickly. This creates tension between innovation, equity, and real student conditions. So, why technology? Digital technologies are now central in universities. Learning management systems, virtual environments, assistive technologies, and more recently, AI-based tools. EA and learning analytics promise personalization, performance monitoring, and early detection of academic risk. From an inclusion perspective, technology is often presented as a way to reduce barriers through accessible resources and universal design for learning. However, technology alone does not guarantee inclusion. In context with digital divides or weak data governments, it can even reinforce these inequalities. So, research on AI and digital technologies in higher education has grown rapidly, but it is fragmented. Many studies focus on only one aspect, or accessibility, or technical performance, or ethics. We still have few integrated reviews that connect accessibility, academic monitoring, and ethical and psychosocial issues. This makes it harder to understand the broader role of AI in building more equitable and sustainable academic environments and to design coherent institutional strategies. The aim of this study was to conduct a systematic literature review on artificial intelligence and digital technologies in inclusive higher educational contexts. We focused on the academic trajectories of students with disabilities, specific educational needs, and other vulnerable situations. My goal here were to identify how these technologies are used to support inclusion, analyze their impact on academic trajectories, such as persistence and success, and examine their ethical, institutional, and psychological implications. This study followed the systematic literature review design guided by PRISMA protocol in order to ensure transparency and methodological rigor. The bibliographic research was carried out in January of 2026 in two main databases, PubMed, PMC, and ERIC. These databases were chosen because they are highly relevant for research in education, psychology, disability, and technology in learning contexts. The time frame considered studies published between 2020 and 2025. This period reflects the intensification of research on educational AI, especially with the development of machine learning and generative AI applications. The research strategy combined three groups of descriptors: terms related to higher education and academic transition, terms related to inclusion, accessibility, disability, and equity, and terms related to technology and artificial intelligence, such as generative AI, chatbots, learning analytics, and assistive technologies. Predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria were used to guarantee the relevance and quality of the studies. To be included, studies had to focus on higher education contexts, address students with disabilities, specific education needs, or other situations of vulnerability or exclusion. Analyze the use of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, or learning analytics, and be empirical studies, theoretical analysis, or systematic reviews published in peer-reviewed journals between 2020 and 2025. Studies were excluded when they focus on other levels of educations, when they dealt only with technical aspects without educational relevance, or when they had no explicit connection with inclusion. Grey literature and non-peer-reviewed documents were also excluded. So following the PRISMA stages, 75 records were initially identified. After screening and eligibility analysis, the final sample considered 49 studies, which form the corpus of this review. We follow the systematic review design guided by PRISMA protocol. So we combine these terms, and after this analysis, the 49 studies were considered at three main analytical axes that have emerged. First, digital technologies and accessibility focus on assistive tools and accessible platforms. Second, AI and learning analytics in supporting academic trajectories focus on risk prediction and personalized support. Third, ethical, institutional, and psychosocial implications, focusing on privacy, BAs, labeling, and the impact on identity and trust. I will now present the main results for each axis. Taken together, these three axes suggest that technology supports inclusion only under specific conditions. It needs to be pedagogically integrated, ethically regulated, and mediated by human relationships. We should move from a focus on individual tools to a focus on inclusive ecosystems. What really matters is how accessibility, resources, learning analytics, teacher training, and psychosocial support are combined with current institutional strategies. Inclusion through technology can be seen as the intersection of three dimensions: accessibility framed by universal design from learning, learning analytics that genuinely support trajectories, and ethical governance that protects rights and promotes equity. These findings are important implications for practice. First, investing in devices or platforms is not enough. Institutions must develop integrated inclusion policies that connect digital accessibility, assistive technologies, and academic support. Second, multidisciplinary teams are essential. Teachers, inclusion services, IT staff, psychologists, and students should work together in designing and monitoring technological solutions. Third, teacher training needs to address accessibility, EI, and ethics so that inclusion is seen as a structural requirement, not an exception. Finally, institutions need clear frameworks for data governance and ethical use of AI, ensuring transparency and accountability. In conclusion, the reviewed studies show that AI and digital technologies have a strong potential to enhance inclusion in higher education. They can reduce barriers, support academic trajectories, and open new forms of participation for students in vulnerable situations. However, the positive impact of these technologies is not automatic. It depends on how they integrated into pedagogical practices, how institutions assume their responsibility for inclusion, and how ethical principles are translated into concrete policies. Fragmented or poorly technological adoption of AI can reinforce existing inequalities, especially when digital devices are structural vulnerabilities are ignored. Human mediation remains essential for meaningful and sustainable academic trajectories. In other words, AI can reduce inequalities or reinforce them. The difference lies in institutional responsibility, ethical governance, and a clear commitment to equity and social justice. Future research should invest more in longitudinal and participatory designs involving students, especially those in vulnerable situations, as active patterns in the evaluation and design of EA-based systems. Comparative studies across different institutional and cultural contexts are also needed to better understand how policies and resources shape the impact of technology on inclusion. It is also important to explore more deeply the connections between technology, well-being, and academic success, especially in relation to stress, mental health, and belonging. Given the rapid evolution of AI, continuous empirical monitoring is necessary. Ethical frameworks and institutional strategies will need regular revision and adaptation. So, to finish, I would like to emphasize that the real challenge is not technological innovation itself. The real challenge is to ensure that digital transforming in higher education remains firmly anchored in equity, responsibility, and social justice. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.